Welcome back, and what a delight to have with us today Bill Whittle. He's a writer, filmmaker, and TV director, and he's going to be the keynote speaker coming up here at the Lincoln Day dinner for the Jackson County Republican Party, and always fun to go to that event. And maybe we ought to just stop, not talk politics, but talk about flying. He's an instrument-rated pilot. So, Bill, it's just you and I go flying and forget all this politics stuff.
Are you a pilot as well?
Yes, sir.
What do you fly?
Well, a little of everything, some twins, singles.
A multi-engine guy.
Yeah.
For those members of our audience out there may not be too familiar with the flying world, they say a piston engine twin single has two engines. If one engine fails, the other engine will fly you to the scene of the accident.
Yeah. Well, anyway, few would understand the flying bug, but those who have it will understand it fully.
Yeah, it's a bad and expensive bug to get.
Yeah,
it's great pleasure to be here this morning.
Expensive. Good to see you, my friend. Tell us a little about what you do.
Well, I kind of stumbled into this. As you mentioned a second ago, I thought I was going to be a fighter pilot I saw the Thunderbirds when I was 5, and from 5 to 17, all I wanted to do was shoot down communists at supersonic speeds and then go on a Command a Mars mission. But the vision in my eye was a little soft for the Air Force Academy, so I ended up, of all things, getting involved with making movies one summer. And I became a theater major at the University of Florida. And I'd always been a good storyteller, and when I was getting ready for my astronaut training, I got a job at the Miami Planetarium when I was 13, and I think from 14 on, I was doing live star lectures, and I always had I think if I have one knack, honestly, Perry, it's that I think I have an ability to explain things to people. You know, if there's something that's kind of complex, I think I can break things down. I didn't know if my dad was a Republican or Democrat till I was probably 18, and I didn't pay any attention to politics at all until I was in my pretty much early 40s. But now I am I'm a full-time political commentator. Talk about conservative issues because I mostly talk about common sense, and I've discovered over the years that the more I read about this, the more sense this makes historically, and the more sense it makes in terms of being integrated. I think that's the most important thing that I like about conservative principles is you don't have to face these horrible contradictions every day. And as you well know, the nice thing about it is you get to say one thing and then go out and do the same thing. So many progressives talk about, just for an example, they'll talk about, oh, we need higher taxes, for all of these programs. And then they tell their accountant, lower the taxes as low as you possibly can, and you have a gun control celebrity who's out there saying we've got to get rid of guns, and in their next movie they blow 40 people away. So we don't have to have a difference between what we say we do and what we actually do because they're pretty much the same things.
Well, great. What's going to be your topic for the Lincoln Day dinner? And then I also understand you'll be sharing with the youth event Saturday as well. What's on your mind?
Well, the youth event's going to be terrific. By the way, if you want to sign up, it's jcrpcc.com, and if you go over to events, there's the Bill Whittle event up there. I think I plan to do it a little. Obviously, do two different things for the main dinner. I want to talk about something that I've been talking about really maybe for the last couple of months only. My belief is that that this country no longer needs to be told, or convinced is a better word. I don't think they need to be convinced about the fact that all of these progressive policies and political correctness isn't working. I mean, they know it. You can just feel the rebound with the results of like Donald Trump, and even in Europe, you see people, they've just had enough of being told things that they know aren't true, that they just know aren't true. And so for the main dinner, I think I'll talk about the fact that we no longer have to convince the country that political correctness is evil. We just have to give them permission to say so. And that's a different argument. And I could go into that in a little more detail if you'd like. But for the youth event, I want to talk more about messaging. One of the problems that I've seen, I've been doing Tea Party events since there was a Tea Party. And one of the problems that I've seen is that we, on the conservative side, really love all of the traditional iconography of the founders. So you'll go to a Tea Party event, let's say, and you'll see people dressed up as George Washington, and you'll see Gadsden flags, and you'll see, quill and pen and the Constitution and all this stuff. And that I love that. It means something to me. It makes me feel good. But for young people who've never been told the history, really, and specifically not told the history, I think a lot of young people look at these kind of things and they hear Tea Party or they hear, conservative, and all they see is 200, 300-year-old costumes, and they start wondering, well, what on earth does this have to do with us? And so one of the things that I like to do is I like to show how the message is consistent, but the messaging can change. And just to give you a small example of that, I tell people, look, the Tea Party movement's based on the Tea Party. That's not a bunch of little old ladies sitting around, talking about gardening. The Tea Party essentially was a bunch of frat boys who got all liquored up because somebody started charging them for their Wi-Fi. And when you put it that way, it makes it accessible to young people in a way that it wasn't before. Young conservatives are pretty brutally outnumbered out there, and psychologically they're beaten up pretty hard. And I like to go in there and show them not only is it true, but it's also cool, and it's also it's kind of it's kind of sexy in a good way, in the way that it would be interesting and kind of romantic to be the minority. So I don't talk about them. I say don't mention the word Tea Party. Just tell them you're the Rebel Alliance and watch what happens.
It's interesting, as you well know, Bill, that when a young person sees the light, so to speak, or has these light bulb moments, they really go gung-ho, and they also feel a sense of that they've been lied to, that they're disappointed that they're not getting the whole story, and when they wake up quickly and they're ready to go.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's amazing how easy it is to flip these people one-on-one, or even in a small group. When I hope to be able to do during the youth event in the afternoon, it's at 1 to 2:30. I hope to be able to turn that into much more of a back and forth kind of a thing, because they're hearing arguments every day from the Bernie Sanders crowd, and they don't know how to answer them. They know that they're wrong, and they know why they're wrong, but they don't really have a sort of a facile answer to things like, free healthcare, just as an example. And when I talk about messaging for young people and how easy it is to flip young people who think they're, socialists, you start off by giving them something that gets them out of their trenches. So, for example, if somebody said, well, how do you feel about free healthcare? Why are Republicans opposed to free healthcare? And I would say, listen, if healthcare were free, I'd be a liberal on healthcare. If healthcare were free, what kind of a jerk would I be to say, no healthcare for you, I just don't like the way you look? But healthcare isn't free. If you have 5 guys in a cardiac operating room, that's one of the most expensive propositions you can put together on the planet. 4 surgeons, nurses, and anestheticians, and so on, plus all of the equipment, is not free. Somebody has to pay for it. And then you start talking about how you pay for it, and then you turn them into conservatives. But I think probably, Perry, the best way to have young people talk to other young people in terms of flipping them over to the light side of the force is to say, is to show them how their own personal behaviors are in fact extremely capitalist, and how everything they do essentially is conservative. And if you have a quick minute, I can give you an example of that.
Go ahead. Before we take a break, go ahead.
Okay, here's an example I've used a lot. I went to Oberlin College several years ago. Oberlin's the most liberal college in America. It's where reason and logic go to die. And I had a bunch of people up there, and about 7 out of 10 said they were socialists. So I said, okay, socialists, what kind of phones do you have? And they held up iPhones and Droids and Samsungs and all the rest. And I said, okay, socialists, your core belief is from each according to his ability to each according to his need. In other words, the people that make the more have to give to the people that need the more. Right? Yes, that's what we believe. I said, okay, bring the phones down to the front of the room. We'll put them in a little basket here. And when we're done tonight, all of us together, not just me, we'll go to downtown Cleveland. We've got $2,000 worth of electronics here. We'll trade that in for $120 bills, and we'll disperse it to the poor people of Cleveland. And guess what? They're not socialists. They're rock rib capitalists, because they're all about wealth redistribution when they think it's somebody else's wealth being distributed to them. But when it's time for them to distribute their wealth to other people, they're William F. Buckley, every one of them.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, let me take a quick break. We'll be back with Bill Whittle. By the way, he's going to be the keynote speaker at the Jackson County Republican Lincoln Day dinner, and also he'll be the keynote speaker at the youth event that afternoon on Saturday. So if you haven't signed up, you can go to the Jackson County Republican Party website and get signed up and get some tickets and be a part of that. We'll be right back.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Welcome back, and what a delight to have with us today Bill Whittle. He's a writer, film director, TV editor. He likes flying airplanes, and I think really in a surrogate way, he's president of CSR. That's Common Sense Resistance. And he'll be the keynote speaker of the upcoming Lincoln Day dinner here in Jackson County, put on by the Jackson County Republican Central Committee, and also be dealing with the young Republicans that afternoon with the youth event. So go to Jackson County Republican Central Committee website, and I'm sure you can get the tickets, and you're not going to want to miss hearing Bill. You know, Bill, how do you help a young person to decipher between a convenient conservative and a truly convicted conservative?
Well, that's a great question. One of the things that this election, that the primaries in this election seems to be doing is selecting out the difference between these two people, two kinds of people, I should say. You know, as I mentioned in the earlier segment, the thing that I respect and admire most about these values is that they're interlocking, that one of them affects the other. And it's not often that I get questions that I'm not had some sort of background on or something that I'm not somewhat familiar with. But generally speaking, whenever I get a question that I'm just floored by, I just don't know how to answer it in terms of having something, at hand. I always ask myself the question, I always go back to what's the freedom position on this? That's pretty much it for me. The Constitution, a lot of conservatives are accused of not wanting any government. That's absurd, and that's anarchy. I don't want a world where there's no government. I want a world where there's limited government. And the term I like to use is I say, I just want a government that'll go back into the box it originally came in. Something that'll fit back into that box. So I think if you had to ask what the core conservative principles are, essentially, they're guided by a sense of virtue. These are the Christian foundations that, whether you're a Christian or not today, nevertheless are built into the structure of the country. And if you really want to get down to brass tacks on this, Perry, I think what it comes down to is this country was founded by people who believed that people who had an internal conscience, who were fundamentally governed by virtue and a sense of being responsible for their actions, whether they got caught or not. People who are guided by internal virtue, you can pretty much leave alone. And this government was designed to leave people alone as much as possible. Governments such as Sharia law or the communist governments, on the other hand, even though they talked about how perfectible man was, they knew what people were, and they simply didn't allow them to do these kind of things. So really what it comes down to is I believe in virtue. And again, talking to young people, you say virtue, they don't have any idea what that means at all. They just think it sounds like, restraining from sex until you're 70 or something. But really, virtue is very simple. It's really, don't hit anybody, don't take their stuff, and do what you say you're going to do. And those are the foundations of both civil law and criminal law. And if you can convince people, look, if you don't hit anybody, you don't take their stuff, and you do what you say you're going to do, those are about the only laws you really need. And the government's job is to enforce those laws, and pretty much those laws, and that's about it. Once you get down to brass tacks like that, then you can make the case to people, young and old, that anything beyond that is somebody else trying to take power over your life, and almost always for financial gain, although they'll almost always cover that with a fig leaf of doing it for the public good. And so at BillWhittle.com, we have a bunch of paying members here, and we like to call ourselves the Common Sense Resistance. It's the membership here that keeps these videos going out for free, and they've probably been seen by 30 or 40 million people now. But really, I just like the term so much, Common Sense Resistance, because that's all we're really talking about. We're talking about people who understand that common sense. Elitists and intellectuals refer to common sense as just kind of like, they think it's something like hay philosophy, like it's the lowest form of like country, witchcraft or superstition. On the contrary, common sense is the accumulated knowledge of billions of people over centuries of civilization, all making the same mistakes and all succeeding in the same way, and it's a resource pool to know what works and what doesn't. And And I think the one thing we need in this country more than anything else is just a good solid dose of common sense, because I think both parties have gotten away from that over the last several decades.
In your opening statement, Bill, you talked about how, and I think you're spot on, that we don't need to be explained over and over what the problem is. We all know it. We all see it now. The pushback is obvious, and it's showing up in various rhetorics and through various campaigns. And so in some ways, it is the conservative election cycle to lose if they don't mess it up. But in the last several days, this thing's gotten really ugly. And what brings us together on putting, as you so appropriately said, putting the government back in the original box is being clouded by a bunch of junk, and it's that very thing that we're sick and tired of. Do you think it's damaging?
Yeah, well, you know, I think you've got a great point there, and I think there are two different kind of things that are going on here. On one hand, the outrage of the American people and the anger of the American people towards the establishment, not just the establishment GOP, just Washington in general, is building to critical levels, and I mean levels that I don't think we've seen since the Civil War, where people, I saw a number yesterday, something like 84% of the people no longer trust their government. That's revolutionary numbers. So anger directed at the corruption and the constant spending and the constant lying and the disappearing of $10 billion is fully justified. That's righteous anger. I think what you mentioned a minute ago that's been concerning me enormously, especially in the last several weeks, is the vitriol that's being leveled among people who are conservatives. Donald Trump, people will call non-Donald Trump supporters rhinos. People like, National Review or Glenn Beck or Rush Limbaugh, people who've been fighting for conservative values pretty much their entire lives, are suddenly rhinos, and they're elite establishment people, and they're big state supporters, and they're traitors and all the other stuff. And conversely, people will look at people who support Donald Trump, and they'll say, well, you've sold out, or you lost your mind, or he's a lunatic, or whatever. Ultimately, it's going to be Trump or it's going to be somebody else, and that either Trump or somebody else is going to have to go after the real enemies, which are people who are by God communists and by God felons. And in a scrimmage, I owe this to my friend Scott Ott, in a scrimmage at the beginning of the season, or just for practice, you want to hit hard, and you want to test your quarterback, and you want to put pressure on the quarterback, but you don't try to spear the quarterback and take your own quarterback out of the game for the season, right? And what we're seeing now, I think, is a level of rhetoric that is so high that it's going to be hard to put these pieces back together again. I think it's completely uncalled for on both sides, and it's got to stop.
I was chairman of the state for 4 years, and one of the biggest tasks we had was keeping the Republicans from circling the wagons and shooting inward.
Yeah, the circular firing squad is definitely something that we have had some experience with here. And we don't do politics as well as the left does, because politics is religion for the left. For the left, the left gets the A team. If you're a left-winger for whatever reason, the best and the brightest of them go into politics. In people with conservative values, usually the best and the brightest go into business or some other occupation where they don't have to depend on taking other people's money at gunpoint. And we don't understand I really genuinely believe this. I think we're too bound by our own sense of decency and honor to fully believe that they can be as venal and dishonest as they are, but they are, in fact, that venal and dishonest. They cheat like crazy. I would love to tell you I came up with this joke myself, but I didn't. But, we have to get everybody out there this election, because, my dad voted Republican until the day he died, and then he started voting Democrat. They cheat. And we have to be prepared to get out there in the kind of numbers where, voter irregularities aren't going to throw the election one way or another.
It's been proven by numbers that with the evangelical voting bloc just doesn't show up. And we're trying our hardest from our influence to say, hey, look, this is a moral, spiritual responsibility to show up and vote. But it is the determining block. And I don't know, with what's coming down now, if there's any motivation for them to get out there, even in the face of ISIS.
Well, I'm so glad to hear you say that. I would never criticize anybody for their conscience, for voting their conscience. That's not my position. I don't believe in it philosophically, and it's really extremely arrogant. But what you said is absolutely true. If the evangelicals had come out even in reasonable numbers, we'd have President Romney for the last 4 years, and we'd be living in a much, much better country now. You may not like the choices that are on the table, but it really is render under Caesar kind of thing, right? We do live in a world where our lives are going to be governed by the politicians that are elected, whether you elect them or not. By not voting, you're making a vote. You're influencing the election by not voting. In this particular case, I think what we saw in Iowa is I've always felt that there are large numbers of conservatives who aren't on the news, and they don't put up bumper stickers, and they don't answer opinion polls, and they don't do any of this stuff. They're quiet, private people, and they mind their own business, and their voices are heard on Election Day. And certainly large numbers of people, Donald Trump looked like he was 7-8 points up in Iowa towards the end of it, but large numbers of people came out for Ted Cruz. And also, I think, for Marco Rubio, who did much better than they were expecting. And you could look at it as a Trump versus non-Trump vote, but that's not the point. I'm trying to heal the party, not split the party here. What we did see in Iowa was that any one of those three guys, either if you'd taken just Trump's numbers, or just Cruz's numbers, or just Rubio numbers, any one of the three would have won in 2012, because that's how many people turned out for this. That's astonishing and extremely hopeful. That's telling me that the big, quiet middle of this silent America is not going to stay home this time. I think every American out there who loves this country understands that this is our last chance. Look, it's never the last chance, right? Not as long as I'm, breathing air am I going to give up. But boy, do we need to win this one. And I think we've got one data set with Iowa, but I've been very, very pleased by what I saw there in terms of the turnout for people who came out to vote who hadn't before. And my hope would be that number would be a large number of evangelicals who understand the damage that these progressives are doing to this country.
Spot on analysis, Bill. Quickly, I only got about a minute left. It boils down to this. We do have a socialistic ideology, and we have a very conservative Judeo-Christian ideology. That's the battle, isn't it?
Yeah, and frankly, if you want to, these terms have changed so much. I don't like sophistry. I like plain language. But when you get down to historically trying to put a label on what I believe as a modern conservative, I'm trying to conserve what used to be traditionally liberal ideas. The founders these were liberal ideas: private property, personal responsibility, limited government. These are traditional, classical liberal ideas. I'm trying to conserve them against people who are trying to destroy them. But if you want to get down to labels, Perry, the best labels that you can find today or at any point in history it's the individualist versus the collectivist. It's really just that simple.
Got to go. Thank you. I'm out of time, Bill. Sorry, but BillWhittle.com, BillWhittle.com. Check out the Jackson County Republican Central Committee's website and get tickets. He'll be the keynote speaker for the Lincoln Day dinner, and he'll also be the keynote speaker for the youth event on Saturday. Bill, you're a delight. I'm going to get you back.
Well, I'm a busy guy, but I'm always happy to talk to you, and always doing what I can to do a little good out there while we still have some time.
All right. Thanks, my friend. Good to see you. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.